having ingrained negative perceptions that we don't challenge about half of the population is problematic. Welcome, wives. In this video, I'm going to talk about our underlying biases about men. I was watching a show with my husband the other night. It's a series about a couple that's looking to become parents. So they tried fertility treatments, and now it takes us through the adoptive process. It was interesting to me that when they got presented with a possible adoptive child who was a boy, the woman said that she'd never thought of having a boy. She never wanted a boy. And as they talked about it, she mentioned that men are the reasons for so many of the ills in society, that men are the aggressors. Most of the bad things done in history were done by men. And she could look on the news and see lots of examples of men doing bad things. Basically, the message was, women good, men bad. And that kind of shocked me because that's definitely not my way of thinking. And also, I didn't even imagine that people actually view the world this way. But then I thought about it and realized my generation has been fed this anti-male narrative for the longest. I mean, men are the ones who do the stealing, they're the aggressors, and they're the abusers. They're the ones who use their strength for ill. All you ever hear about is bad stories about men. Oh, men are the ones in power. The system is designed for them, and they just abuse their power, and they don't recognize their privilege, and all this other stuff. I can imagine that that would really skew one's thinking about men. From watching that, I thought, how must this be impacting people's dating lives, people's marriages, if the underlying perception of men is so bad? So, ladies, what are the deep-seated beliefs we have about men, and how might those be impacting our lives? My last series of videos was on patriarchy, and I said in those videos, I am a fan. So if we take ourselves back to the time when, let's say, patriarchy was more widespread, and indeed men were in power, this time that we're made to think that was just so awful for women. For the majority of the men in society back then, they had wives and they had families. And guess what that means? They had female input. They had female input in their lives. Now, whether or not they listen to that is a different question. But let me tell you, if you're sharing the bed with someone in the intimacy of the marriage relationship, you will have that person's ear, whether he likes it or not. And the women back then knew how to package their messages so that they would be heard by their husbands. So much as men were in power and all that, the women had a very subtle, understated, but present and real power in society by virtue of the ear that they had. As it is now, these negative perceptions about men result in us women thinking we don't need them. We just don't need them around. They mess things up. You know, we might need them for physical, but other than that, we'd rather not have them. I don't need a man. I can do bad all by myself. The trouble with that is that as women, we can actually cut men completely out of the family life, which would mean that we do not have male input into matters of everyday living. Back in the day when men were in power, political power, maybe in their profession, women still had an effect on that, on those spaces, because they had men within the home. As it is now, as women, if we buy into these negative narratives about men and we push them out of our personal lives and our homes and all that, that leaves us without that balance. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. We all need balance in our lives. I don't have it all together. I don't see things 360. No, I have blind spots. We all have blind spots. We all have biases. We all have things that make us see the world through a very specific lens. But I believe it broadens our worldview to have people with different lenses weigh into our way of seeing the world so we get balance, like I said. So, wives, and especially aspiring wives, I think this week about what you believe about men, what you have come to believe, what you hold as true about men. And I ask you to challenge those beliefs. If you believe that men are selfish, take a step back and think through that and think, okay, so who are the selfish men I know in my life? And then break that down, because a lot of that selfishness is people say, oh, he just spends his own money on his own things, or he gets to go out at work and doesn't contribute in the home by taking care of the children. But is it selfish to work and have all your income take care of other people? Is that selfish? Sometimes we think, oh, men are just so aggressive. But challenge that and think, why are they aggressive? And is it always a bad thing? I mean, aggression may not necessarily be punching people out. That I don't believe is a good thing. But the ability to do that does not make that person a bad person. Because if there's a robber and I'm walking down the street with my husband, you better be sure I want my husband to be able to punch that guy. So just because somebody has that ability does not necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Here's another one. Many people think, oh, men are just cheaters. They just are after women left, right, and center. But challenge that too and look at your life and see if you actually find truth in this. Because I think that it's harder for men to find someone to sleep with than it is for women these days. I mean, it's super easy, especially if as women we don't have strict parameters or strict criteria. You can find somebody to sleep with easily with the internet and everything. And all you got to do is advertise yourself as being open for business. Whereas for men, it's not as easy. Especially for men who are gainfully employed within their marriages and families. It's a lot of work. So just some thoughts for us today. Think about those biases that you may have and challenge them, because I believe we need each other. And having ingrained negative perceptions that we don't challenge about half of the population is problematic, especially when we, as the bearers of life, may have sons. And if we have those unchallenged negative perceptions, what's that gonna do as we're raising our sons? I don't believe there should be a gender war. We're in this together. I don't know who convinced us that we're competing against each other. We are different. We are fundamentally different. And I've said it before, I believe this is a good thing. God designed us this way. Let's not make our differences tear us apart, but let's use those differences to edify each other and to build society. Till next time.